Hello and welcome to Tight Lines. This week our main focus falls on match angling, one of the very few sports in which England truly excels. Trent Team England's rated #1 in the world, and Will Raison, who joins me in the bothy, is an integral part of the squad and a former individual world champion. We're looking ahead to this year's event and finding out what Will does the rest of the year, as well as taking a peek at some of his methods and tactics. Also on today's show, you can see who earned their place in the final of the UK's premier match fishing event in the latest two Fishermania qualifiers at Boulding's Pools and Coleman's Cottage. We'll be out on the bank with specialist angler Dean Macy on a tough spring session he had targeting the big bream that reside in London's Walthamstow reservoirs. I'll have my take on the sport to be found on all types of waters, with tips on the most effective methods and baits and the conditions you're likely to face this weekend. And as another month has gone by, I'll also be announcing May's winners in our Young Angler photo competition. Well, it's good to see you, Will. It must be a pretty busy time of year for you, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. You know, it really is full on at the moment. Not just the fishing, but obviously the work that I do within the trade. The new shop that we've got down the lakes and everything, it's just full on, mate. But
It takes a long time to walk around that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, definitely.
And when I was there last time, your dad said he's having a new extension built as well.
Oh, don't. I think it's definitely going to happen, but like I say, we're just trying to find our feet. It's a very big shop, and like I say, it just takes a bit of getting used to, but it's good.
But the fishing's good, that's the main thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it really is hitting form. Went through a little bit of a funny week or two where the temperature warmed up, and then we had that real cold, almost northeasterly wind appear for a couple of weeks, and it just seems to have knocked it back a little bit. I think the fish were getting ready to spawn, and now that's obviously knocked them back, and they don't really know what to do or what's happening at the moment, but there's still some big weights coming out.
You been getting out on the lakes yourself?
Yeah, I've been doing a bit, because the Europeans and that isn't going ahead for the England team now. Obviously the preparation for that has taken a bit of a back seat, and I've been able to fish a few opens at Gold. I've actually won a couple. So
oh dear, there's a shock and a surprise.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I bet the customers are well pleased. Well, the main event at Cudmore now only 6 weeks away. The qualifying heat is well and truly on, as Andy Ford discovered on his travels last week.
Just 6 places left in the Fishermania final, there was an air of anticipation at Boulding's Pools in Shropshire. Time's running out in the quest for match fishing's biggest domestic title. At least there was a promise of better weather for the 130 anglers taking part. But a cold May has made lots of venues fish very strangely this year. The sun was shining, but there was a real edge to the wind. The unseasonably cold temperature has affected feeding patterns in all of the 10 previous qualifiers. It's led to some of the closest matches ever seen in Fishermania. This would be another one. Jamie Hughes was on peg 3 of Acorn, a pool not usually used in qualifiers. Although he was hooking fish from the start, landing them was another matter. A huge snag would cause Jamie issues throughout the match. Amazingly, this was Darren Cox's first qualifier of the year. Demand for tickets meant record applications, so former finalist Darren had to wait for his chance. His draw of peg 4 on Willow was a good one, and a cunning tactical switch after the first hour would set him on his way. The carp weren't feeding well again though. Neil Machin drew the peg that won last year's qualifier here at Boulding's, but 16 on Larch would produce little more than £50 for the 2006 champion. There were 12 pools being used for today's match, a decision made to give anglers the maximum amount of room. But the fishing was still patchy. On stock, Grant Albert would win the section with £75.15 of F1s and carp. Nearby, another angler struggling with snags was Steve Openshaw. Steve managed to land more than he'd lost, but in tight matches you can't afford to lose too many. On Hawthorne, John Harvey got into a good run halfway through the match. On another day, his £95.5 wouldn't be enough here at Boulding's, but today that would be good enough for fourth. As the match entered the business end, Darren Cox had abandoned fishing shallow for cruising carp. Instead, he was fishing on the bottom for barbel. It was working too. Darren was close to £100. So was former champion Jamie Hughes. With a bite almost every put-in, Jamie had probably lost £100 of fish in the snags, but he'd also landed plenty. He was playing this one as the whistle for the end of the match was sounded. It was a carp of around £4. Darren Cox was first away. His switch to target barbel had been a spectacular success. The total was £97 12 ounces. Jamie Hughes was claiming a weight of around £100 too. As he weighed in, news from the other pools was that Steve Openshaw had overtaken Darren Cox and was leading the match with £98 4. It was nerve-wracking stuff. How much had Jamie lost? And crucially, how much did that last fish weigh? With the chance of a record fourth consecutive appearance in the Fishermania final at stake, Jamie Hughes' total was £102 14 ounces. Steve Openshaw took second and Darren Cox third. Another close one with £7 separating the top four anglers. Just as well, Jamie kept his composure.
I fancied the peg. The locals and some of my mates that come here regularly said that it definitely had potential. Then it was a little bit windy and then I began to fancy it less once I started hooking fish across. And it's been an absolute nightmare getting them out, but luckily by keeping my head for most of the time, I've managed to just get them off.
The story of Fishermania this year has been near misses, 2 ounces, a couple of pounds here, a couple of pounds there. Were you starting to think, I'm blowing my chance here?
Yeah, for a while I was thinking I'd lost it in the third and fourth out when I went a bit slow. But that always happens. I've been here a lot and you just got to keep on with what you're doing. And if you're lucky, you get a little run at the end. That's how it worked out.
It would be another thriller at Coleman's Cottage in Essex 3 days later. This is a fishery where huge weights are often needed to win matches. But once again, it would be a struggle for many.
3, 2, 1, 0.
Low weights, though, don't equal poor matches. Far from it. At the draw, no one wanted to be here on Stepfield Lake. The thinking was you'd have a good hour catching small carp, and that would be it. Several anglers didn't even bother going to their pegs. It worked in favour of John Wincup, who'd win his section with £75. Elsewhere, there were plenty of carp cruising about in the surface layers, but they weren't feeding. As a result, Pathfield and Copse Lakes were out of the running. So all eyes turned to Wood Lake. On peg 1, Jamie Maguire did well from an end peg, but his weight of £88 would only be good enough for fifth. Directly opposite was Gary Bell on peg 40. An early carp on feeder tactics set him on his way. He would be among the contenders. Last year the match was won from Wood 38. Here Wayne Taylor was also doing well. His dream of making it into the final started way back in 2005. And amazingly this was his 50th qualifier. Maybe it would be his chance at last. Another in with a chance from 130 dreamers taking part was Andy Morrison. He was having a steady match from peg 30 on Wood, and where others struggled, he seemed to be able to keep fish coming. Back on Stepfield though, and the 2010 champion Neil McKinnon was catching steadily, building towards a weight that would put him in the frame to qualify for another final. Coleman's has the potential to deliver lots of fish late on in a 5-hour match like this one. The carp switched on for Gary Bell on peg 40 with an hour left. And 2 pegs to his right, Wayne Taylor was also starting to catch from his margin. There was no way to call it, but no one could have guessed the drama to come. With the weigh-in underway on Wood, the scales had already recorded Neil McKinnon's total. He took the lead with £89 12. At peg 30 on Wood, Andy Morrison was heading for a big total too. Incredibly, it was £89 12. It was a tie for first. The organisers scrabbled for the rule book, planning an hour-long fish-off between Neil and Andy. But Wayne Taylor and Gary Bell were still to weigh. Wayne was all smiles as his total ensured there was no extra time. £93 exactly. On peg 40, Gary Bell knew he'd lost 4 really big fish, including a ghost carp of £15 at the net. But he still had a weight. The total was £92. While Neil McKinnon and Andy Morrison tied for third, Gary Bell was second. So Wayne Taylor, a 33-year-old gas fitter from Hastings, who spent the last 11 years unsuccessfully chasing a place in the final, had finally done it.
Sort of £88 win it, and I didn't think I'd any win it. Really didn't. Sort of £70 at the most, I thought. When I lifted the net out, I sort of had a rough idea. And then it was just every emotion you could imagine. I was in the pub last night talking about Perry Stone. Really wanted him to win it, and now I'm going to have to try and stop him.
You look a bit emotional.
Oh, God, I just cried my eyes out. I really could. It's everything I've wanted for so long.
Once again, a quality fields assembling. There's lots of first-timers this year, but there are some very good anglers amongst them, and it could be anyone's trophy. Matt Hall stands out obvious. He's going for a hat-trick of titles. Maybe it'll be Perry Stone's year, though. It's his 3rd final in a row. 2013 winner Jamie Hughes will be desperate to match Matt Hall's feat of double champion. And he's in his 4th consecutive final, which equals Steve Ringer's record. In a couple of weeks, we'll have Fordy's report from the next 2 matches at Woodland Lakes and Woodland View. It's going to be a gripping final. Well, what do you reckon? I mean, Perry's your mate. He's a regular at goals.
Yeah, I mean, Perry's a fantastic angler. He's up there practising. Like I say, I wouldn't ever bet against him. It is a real quality field. Anglers like Eddie Green, Simon Coldclough, anglers that perhaps aren't known in the same breath as Perry, because Perry's been in the event a number of years. But we've seen what happens in the international when you tackle it slightly different. Now, you've got anglers like Simon Coldclough, Eddie Green, that like fishing for silverfish.
Yeah.
They do it a lot, and they're both very, very good at it. So you could see a completely... A bit of a swing. You know, you've got anglers in the final like Perry, like Matt Hall, who like to catch big fish. They like to go for it. And on the other end of the scale, you've got anglers like Jamie Hughes, Simon Coldclough, Eddie Green, that are a little bit more, not wanting to offend the others, but a little bit more tactical. They'll fish for the small fish. I know Perry and that, you know, they're on about the skimmers and that, and they will do them. But I know Perry, he likes the big fish. and given half a chance, you know, you're not going to stop him. He's in the form of his life, Perry.
I'll get you to sort the odds out then, Will. Welcome back. Will Raison's with you this week, and we saw a bit of Fishermania there before the break. And you've not got a bad Fishermania record, have you?
No, not too bad. The internationals have been a real lucky match for me.
No, I'm not talking about the internationals. I'm talking about Fisho.
No.
One qualifier, where was it? You went?
Larford, yeah.
And somebody didn't turn up on the...
That's correct,
You were there fishing the day before. Somebody didn't turn up. You got their ticket, won the qualifier, got to the final at Hayfield, came second.
Came second. Yeah, it's a fantastic... I mean, you see the guys that have qualified for this year, and they're getting a bit emotional and that. And some people might not understand that, but when you've actually been to a final and been in that kind of arena, it's just fantastic. The crowds and just the atmosphere. I mean, when I set up in the final I fished at Hayford, I looked behind me and it's like, blimey.
You were outside the pub, though,
yeah? Yeah. No, they weren't there for the pub.
Yeah. But now the internationals, I mean, I think they've taken off, and my own experience of them is they are just absolutely sensational viewing, because you said before, it's a different kind of match.
It is, definitely. I mean, on the Saturday event, you see people that are well behind, they've fallen behind, and they're almost got that look of not being too bothered. They want the time to pass, because, you know, you get good anglers on fish and the match can be over. But it's a completely different... It really shows what match fishing is about, the international side of it. The fact that you're fishing for each other, there's a lot of tactics, you've got the managers behind you, not only analysing what you're doing, where you are, but where the other teams are, and it's just fantastic.
Because the rules are very different as well, with pellets and artificial baits, and it's
all fish to SIPS rules, so it's fantastic.
Yeah. And of course, Team England are unbeaten in the Fishermania International Challenge, winning it for the past 4 years. Now, Holland finished second last year. They went on to win the World Championships in September in Croatia. Now, you're going out to Slovenia this year, trying to win back that team title. It was very, very hard for you last year in Croatia. I know the venue was funny, the fish were funny. It was. What's Slovenia like? Have you got any tips?
I've actually been there before.
you?
But again, it's not too far from where we were in Croatia.
Yeah.
And it can obviously be affected by rainfall again, very much like last year.
Yeah.
It was, you know, something else. The flow on the river was just something I've never experienced before, and certainly not fished in before. But if the river's normal in Slovenia, it'll be very, very good. It's deep. There's a few pegs that are a little bit tricky with rocks. There's some quality fish, and it's about getting out onto the actual riverbed. You don't want to be fishing, as you know, from fishing on the Thames and the Trent. You don't want to be fishing on top of the rocks. You need to be out onto the actual riverbed to catch those quality fish.
Do you think that's why the Dutch did so well in Croatia? Because they used to fish in these big, deep canals, rock-strewn sides, massive tow when the lock gates opened.
Yeah.
Do you think that's why they did so well there, or do you think they had another?
I think it definitely played a part, but they're very similar to the English setup. You know, they've got some young guys, they've got some slightly older guys, and more importantly, with the Dutch team, they've got a very good manager in Jan, who's not only been there and seen it and done it himself.
Been here and seen it and done it as well.
Exactly,
Good lad,
exactly. You know, and as an angler fishing under managers that have actually been there, seen it and done it, it's immense. It really is.
Do you think they'll be your main threat this year, or you know, I mean, Hungary are very strong, and
the
home nations, as you know, their home, the local teams, so they're used to these waters. Do you think they'll be good enough to?
Definitely, definitely, and confidence is a major thing in fishing, and their confidence will be sky high. But there's a number of teams at that Pacific style of fishing, and the methods that are going to come into it. Totally unique methods that a lot of people have never used are going to come into it. And a lot of these teams are very good at it.
I mean, you brought in some of these floats. I'm going to pick this one up first because if you have quite a close look at this, you'll see that it's got an eye there and another eye there. Now, this is, I would call them a double ring slider because that's what we used to call them. Sometimes I had 3 rings on as well. And the reason why I picked this one up, this is so similar to a float that I designed in the late 1970s for fishing the Medway and some of the deeper bits of the Great Ouse, because you fish it as a slider with a bulk shot. When a waggler, you can't do it with a waggler. When places like the Medway, where you've quite often in what Frank Barley called parrot cages, with trees above your head, so you can't do a big cast with a fishing deep. And anything over 10 foot deep is quite difficult to fish fixed. But with these, with a slider, you have the weight, the float resting on the shot. It casts out, follows the shot, it sits in. Then the line obviously slides down through these eyes. And you've got a couple of different...
there's a few different
There's
shapes
3
and
quite
sizes.
different ones. I'm going to pick these up as 3 very different. Why would you use... In what situations would you use each one?
Well, I mean, like I say, there's different designs of floats for different styles of presentation. The one thing that the top and bottom slider allows you to do over just the bottom attached slider is it actually enables you to hold the bait still. And on this Pacific River in Slovenia that we're fishing, they're quality fish, vimba, bream, barbel. And I know for a fact, having fished there on the pole, that they do respond to a stationary bait. Like I say, everybody's quite up to speed with the bottom-only slider, but it doesn't enable you to hold the bait still. Now, with a 5 or 6 metre rod, if you're faced with a rocky peg and you need to get beyond that, obviously you can't do that with the pole.
No.
But with a 5-6 metre bolognese rod, a decent sized float, you can go out past the rocks onto the riverbed, and more importantly, with a top and bottom slider, hold the bait still right over the fed area and catch these quality fish, which is what you're going to need to do.
And this one in particular, I mean, that's 25 grams. That's best part, that's like an ounce Aussie bomb.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, the river in question is up to 10, 12 metres deep, not so far out. You've only got 10, 12 metre long pegs. So you need to get the bait down, you need to get it presented correctly in that area in front of you. And sometimes that means using floats, as you can see, up to 25 grams.
We've got absolutely nothing like that in the UK. I suppose if you went down maybe to the Relief Channel, the lower end of the Great Ouse, the other Ouse, the Yorkshire Ouse in York, where it's very deep and where you get a bit of flow when the tide's running out, I suppose you've got that. But how on earth can you practice for that kind of fishing here?
It is very difficult, but I'm in a fortunate position where I've got friends in Hungary. Tamas Walter, who you know, he's now associated with Dawa. His team's sponsored by Dawa, his domestic team, not the Hungarian team. And I've actually got an invite to go out 4 weeks before the World Championships to fish an event on the same pegs as the World Championships. And it's little things like that. Like you say, there's nowhere in this country to go and fish. And sometimes it's about cancelling everything domestic and actually going to the venue 4 weeks before, 4 or 5 days practice, coming back, preparing, and then going out for the main event.
How much do you enjoy that sort of thing? I mean, you do a lot of travelling in Europe, you fish loads of different venues, and I know it's a massive, important part of you, which is why you've only fished one Fisher-Mania qualifier.
Yeah.
How important is that to you?
It's massively important to me. Obviously, the domestic scene is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, with bigger events, more money to be won. But when you're representing your country, to me, it's still the number one, you know, the pinnacle of my career, what I do. But actually going out and trying to perfect methods and take on the world's best, that's what really lights my fire.
But it does as well. I can tell it does, the way just sitting here talking to you, and I know how much it does as well. And I mean, you've brought back some great trophies over there, including a wife, if you don't mind me saying so. And you've not done bad in Europe. Yeah, you've not done bad in Europe. But I mean, and I know what the answer is, but I've got to ask you anyway. Team or individual?
To me, definitely the team. The individual is nice, and if I'm perfectly honest, when I did win the World and the European, it took a lot of pressure off, and I think you start to enjoy it more. The constant expectation of people saying, you will, you will, you will, and then you go and do it. But people often say to me, you know, like, what was the highlight? And the first year I got in the world team, fishing with my heroes, people like Alan, Bob, Stevie, that I'd only watched on telly and watched from afar, was the number one.
I remember that day as well. Fantastic day. Now, as far as still waters are concerned, there are still some amazing carp captures of specialist anglers. It seems really on a pre-spawning munch, and until we get a concentrated spell of really warm weather, spawning seems just a bit unlikely. Quality boilies fished over pellets and crush boilies should do the trick. Now, this might be a good weekend for a floater attack too, with plenty of goodies on the surface and not too much wind to worry about. Make sure your bait moves naturally with any free offerings though, so use a long hook length. On commercial fisheries, sport's been outstanding, with lots of carp and F1s feeding. Maggot and casters catching plenty, but I think this is meat and pellet time, and we mentioned that in part two, Will, that meat and pellet's working well. When you fish that method, and we also mentioned 2+2 in the Young Angler Month, and that 2 sections and the top 2 kit just seems to be the right area, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not in the margins. You're targeting the fish that want to come in the margins but aren't quite coming in yet, and it's a fantastic line. You can feed it very accurately. It's not that deep. It's easy to do. It's a very easy throwaway line to feed while you're fishing other things, and it can quite often be absolutely solid.
Nice and easy to concentrate on it.
Yeah, definitely.
But when you feed that, are you feeding same size pellets as using meat, so 6mm pellets and a 6mm bit of meat, or slightly smaller pellets?
Again, I try to match it, all the baits, the similar sort of size. So if I'm feeding 8mm pellets, 8mm meat. But the one good tip is that if there's a lot of small fish around, try and lose the meat and just fish with hard baits, and that'll really pick out the bigger fish.
Do you band your pellets on the pole?
I do, yeah, but I actually put the band on the hook, not on a hair.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, because I mean, I do the same. I mean, I like to fish a banded pellet off the hook when I'm fishing a pellet waggler and on the bomb. But when I'm fishing the pole, it just seems, because you're instant on the bite and not striking,
Exactly, it needs to be really close to the hook, and putting the actual band on the hook and then the bait on the on the band is definitely the best way.
I mentioned pellet wagglers, and I've got a question from Darren in Wigan. He's having a bit of trouble on the waggler. He can't seem to get it to bury. Now, I don't think he means to bury the line. I think he means he can't get the float to go under. You bought a selection of pellet wagglers in here, but I think before we look at these, I think what he means is he can't get bites on it, and that is all about feeding.
Definitely, it's about feeding. You've got to be aggressive. You're targeting fish on a pellet waggler that are feeding in the surface layers. And the only reason they're up there is they're looking for food. They're tuned into noise. So 8mm pellets catapulted out in a nice tight area, and then casting the float slightly past, anticipating a bite immediately. But again, that's where people go wrong. They cast the float out, and then they move the float into the fed area. And like I've just said, these carp, they're tuned into noise. And the last thing you want to do is to cast the float out and move it away from the splash and the noise that float's made.
They come to that plot, don't they?
Definitely, yeah.
And you said be aggressive. Now, quite an aggressive angler, probably not as aggressive as he used to be, but I feed very often, but very few.
Yeah.
I'm a 2 or 3 pellet man rather than a big pouch full.
Definitely. When I mean aggressive, I mean keeping the regularity up, not 100 pellets every 5 minutes, but like you say, 3, 4, 5, 6 pellets, but every 30 seconds.
Now, you've brought in a couple of floats here, and you mentioned the splash. Now, this is quite a heavy one. This takes 12 grams, which will cast a very long way. And I wouldn't fish this, wouldn't even dream of fishing it with less than a 6-pound line. It's a big float to be casting, isn't it? And also, another tip, don't leave it rigged up on your rod every time, because you stretch that 5 or 6 metres of line that comes up, so change it quite regularly. But looking at this, you see that? Can you see that disc on the bottom? Now, there's 2 things that does. First of all, it makes a bigger splash.
Definitely.
But secondly, it stops the float from diving into that poor old carp on the nose as it comes looking for the plop.
Exactly. It pops up immediately.
Yeah.
So what that enables you to do is to watch the float and really anticipate that bite. A lot of your bites will come on the pellet waggler when you start doing it correctly, casting, leaving it exactly where it lands. A lot of the bites will come within 10 or 15 seconds. It really is if it's going to happen, it's going to happen very quick.
Now, there's 2 different kinds here. They're both similar.
Yep.
This is a balsa body with these leads. These weights, they're not leads, they're brass rings. You can take some of those off and adjust them to make... Do you ever have a lot sticking out? Or
Yeah, I mean, again, if it's nice and calm, the conditions, I tend to have quite a bit of tip showing. But the one advantage you've got with these loaded wagglers is if you add more weight, bring it right down, it will cast a lot better in windy conditions. And when you're trying to fish accurately, you're feeding accurately and you're casting in the same place time and time again, obviously accuracy of the initial cast is so important.
The other thing, and I don't know whether it's by design or by your accident, but if you do dot it down in the wind, it doesn't get blown about. But you imagine if you've got all that sticking out, especially with the veins, it's like a big sail. It'll pull it along. If you can dot it right down, or maybe use one without veins.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I go out of my way to make sure that the rig and, more importantly, the hook bait stays exactly where it lands. And any kind of wind or tow, or you actually retrieving it in, even if it's only 10 centimetres, where that bait lands is where it needs to stay, because the carp will definitely come to the noise.
I reckon Darren will thank you for that and catch a few more fish.
Hopefully.
What's coming up for you next?
We've got a few things in the pipeline, really preparing for the World Championships. A lot of the gear we need for it is a little bit specialist, not easy to get hold of. Going to a couple of bits of the River Thames to try and just have a go with the sliding floats. I've fished with them quite a lot in the past. So it's about that, really. Obviously got the Fishermania at Cudmore, the International.
I just thought it's less than 2 weeks the season starts on the rivers.
Yeah, definitely.
Mate, we'll have to get out and have a day together on the Thames. I'd
love that.
I'll show you the deepest bit you'll ever see. Now, remember, you can find podcasts of previous shows as well as loads of films on our website. You can also follow us on Twitter to get information on the show, as well as Fordy's live Fishermania updates. Don't forget that. Next week, my guest is all-rounder Julian Chidgey, so please join us. We're on at 6 p.m. on Sky Sports 1. That's 6 Friday show, 6 o'clock, Sky Sports 1. Of course, if you missed that, or the repeats, you can watch us on demand. Find us in the Sky Sports section, have catch-up. But for now, have a great week, wherever you're fishing, and whatever you're fishing for, and tight lines. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, mate. Thanks.
Brilliant stuff.
Enjoy Sky Sports Live. On all screens, on the go, and the best bits on demand.